Now, it is my honor to present to Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, our leader in the Senate, with the John S. McCain IRI Freedom Award. And I'm going to say a few words about our leader, but I also want to thank Secretary Chow, his amazing wife, for all the great work that she is doing on behalf of our country. Now, Mitch McConnell's commitment to our institutions, his wise counsel, his insistence on playing the long game, and his commitment to dignity of all has been a source of stability for all of us in the United States Senate and in our great nation. As with most of us, Leader McConnell learned lessons that have stuck with him throughout his career from his mother. As an infant, Senator McConnell was diagnosed with polio. At that time, there was no treatment, only therapy. The doctors decided that he was not to walk for the first 2 years of his life. Think about that for a task for Leader McConnell's mom. So he says in his autobiography, "So my mother, like a drill sergeant, literally watched me every waking moment of my life for 2 years." Now, during this time, at the height of the Second World War, his father was fighting the Nazis in Europe, one of those humble Americans I spoke about earlier who helped literally liberate hundreds of millions of people from tyranny. Leader McConnell learned patience and persistence from his mother and from both of his parents, Kentuckians who supported civil rights at a time and place where doing so was actually dangerous. He learned fundamental values of fairness and the dignity and worth of each individual. From the very beginning, Senator McConnell brought those qualities to the United States Senate. As I mentioned previously, in his maiden speech on the Senate floor, when he was only 43 years old, Leader McConnell spoke in support of a bill imposing sanctions on the apartheid government of South Africa. In that speech, he encouraged his colleagues to, quote, "join in a unified effort to correct one of the most abhorrent and criminal examples of injustice evident anywhere in the world." Now, I know many of us believe that Ronald Reagan was one of our best presidents. I certainly do. But on South Africa at this time, he was on the wrong side of history. Mitch McConnell was on the right side. And he has been on the right side on so many other issues since, including his steadfast support of IRI and institutions that help build democracy around the world, as well as his commitment to protecting our own democracy, an unending task for all of us. He told a reporter recently that one of his main goals in his time as leader was to preserve our country's democratic institutions, to, quote, "build the country's resilience and its antibodies so that it is stronger and better prepared for the future and whatever comes our way." And he's done exactly that. Under his leadership, our third branch of government, the judiciary, has been fundamentally reinforced with judges that believe in the concepts of liberty and justice and limited government, just as our founders envisioned. This McConnell legacy will endure for generations to come. Underlying his pragmatism is also an unapologetic idealism. He understands that our commitment to liberty, to freedom, and to democracy has no borders. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, the 2019 John S. McCain Freedom Award recipient from IRI.
Leader, we'll do a quick picture.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan.
Yes, sir.
Well, goodness, thank you, Dan. I really appreciate that overly kind introduction, and it won't surprise you to know it's humbling to be here tonight for an event named for our dear friend, John McCain. We may not see in our lifetimes as effective an advocate for the ideals that drive this organization. And Cindy, I want you to know we all feel his absence deeply. But we celebrate that John's example lives on in the millions of lives transformed by his commitment to liberty, democracy, and human rights. And the work Cindy McCain is carrying on so capably in his memory. Thank you, Cindy, again. Well, I've long admired IRI and its mission. Over the years, members of my staff have worked for this organization. I'm thinking of folks like Paul Grove and Mike Mitchell and others I know who served as trainers. So we've been fellow travelers for a long time. I know it's getting late, but I'd like to briefly share my passionate view of the values that unite everyone in this room. The Senate faced important choices about America's leadership from the moment I arrived in Washington in the mid-1980s. Dan just mentioned in the introduction that one of the first things I considered as a freshman senator and an admirer of Ronald Reagan was I going to stand up to him on some really bad advice he'd been given about what America might be able to do about apartheid in South Africa. He had a bunch of advisors who were hard over that somehow sanctions wouldn't work. My conclusion was it wasn't just about sanctions, it was about us and what we stand for. And so Reagan, based on the advice of his advisors, vetoed the anti-apartheid bill. I voted to override the veto. And as I thought back, and as Dan mentioned, on my early days here, it was a vote I was really proud of. And I know the president was given bad advice, and if he had it to do over again, my guess is he would have signed the bill. I'd grown up watching the civil rights movement, like a lot of you of my generation. I thought it was important to get this right and to make a statement about us to the rest of the country in relation to that horrendous regime. Now, as you're fully aware, I'm not known for wearing my humanitarian tendencies on my sleeve. People don't always expect the guy that my Democratic colleagues call the Grim Reaper to be focused on human rights and democracy promotion. But honestly, I see no daylight between preserving our constitutional order at home and assisting in the fight for freedom around the world. That's why in my career I've made, for example, democracy in Burma a pet issue, back when hardly anyone seemed to have heard of the place, and over the years I've been increasingly in a position to actually address it. I worked to support its people and its inspirational leader, Aung San Suu Kyi. We used to pass notes back and forth because she was denied the opportunity to receive mail during that 20-some-odd years she was under house arrest in Rangoon. I worked to secure sanctions on the military junta and support policies to empower civil society activists pushing for political, constitutional, and economic reforms. I applauded President Obama when he sought an opening with Burma. He might have been a little too quick to declare victory there, but I'm proud of the progress that's been made since the darkest days of the junta. The tragic violence of recent years, however, reminds us that progress toward a free society can be halting, fits and starts. but we know turning our back is not the answer. So Burma is just one example. In the early 1990s, I sponsored a bill called the U.S. Hong Kong Policy Act to remind China and everyone else that support for democratization is a fundamental American interest. As the chair of the Foreign Operations Subcommittee, a job Lindsey Graham now has, I sought to influence the ways to promote these universal values in our work around the country. Despite this experience, it isn't lost on me that I'm up here tonight with some true champions, and we've heard from them. I mean, the extraordinary ambassador from the Guaido administration in Venezuela, boy, he was impressive. And of course, you had a lot of other impressive speakers tonight, representing important causes in places like Kiev and Moscow and Caracas. They're on the front lines, obviously, in this struggle for democracy and self-determination. These people are standing up for individual liberty in the face of enormous difficulty. Think how easy our lives are compared to what they are going through. Their presence offers a powerful reminder of why U.S. policy and U.S. leadership always needs to support the good guys. We always need to support the good guys, anywhere in the world. Many of today's crisis areas are places where American leadership could have been better deployed to help the good guys. From the reset with Russia that swept Putin's invasion and occupation of Georgia under the rug, to American passivity in the face of Russian authoritarianism at home, and yet more aggression abroad, especially the invasion and occupation of Ukraine, to a pivot to Asia that seemed to abandon traditional allies and was made hollow in any event by imprudent defense cuts. Through it all, from timetables for withdrawing from Iraq and Afghanistan to a dismissive line that nation building begins at home, to the feckless red line in Syria, the consistent theme in those years was a retreat. America took steps to actually disengage from the world. And both America and the world were worse off as a result. That isn't a unanimous verdict, but I suspect most of you here tonight agree that we need not shy from the reality that America is a global power. We make no apologies for it. We are a global power, and that sustaining our global leadership is in our national interest. We're not involved in other countries for any other reason than it's in our interest to do so, to promote democracy and freedom around the world, and that's what IRI stands for. So I'm glad that this administration is taking some strong steps that align with this understanding. I couldn't be prouder to share the stage tonight with these brave people that we've been hearing from, who represent President Guaido. I'm glad this administration is standing with the people of Venezuela and leading the international effort to help them achieve a peaceful, democratic future. I'm also proud our nation has begun rebuilding our armed forces, something John McCain hammered us on year after year after year, and lived long enough to see it actually happen. And speaking of the Russians, I'm proud we've begun treating Russia like the serious threat that John McCain knew it to be and repeated it over and over and over. We're making it clearer that unchecked geopolitical prospecting is a thing of the past. And Ukraine's success and continued commitment to the path of reform, including last month's incredible elections, the peaceful democratic transfer of power, testifies powerfully to the other former Soviet states, including Russia, that a better, freer future is possible. I'm also proud we've brought ISIS physical caliphate to an end and made more progress in the Middle East. These are some real steps forward, but our task remains urgent. We need to stay engaged in the Middle East to counter radical terrorists and reinforce the work of our partners. We need to work diplomatically to end the Syrian civil war. This year, since one of my responsibilities as majority leader is to decide what we're going to do and when we're going to do it, I made foreign policy legislation the Senate's very first priority. Senate Resolution 1, and it included the Syria Civilian Protection Act. We're still waiting for Speaker Pelosi to give it a vote. And thinking broadly, my friends, we need to do everything we can to not allow our nation to forget the lessons of the 20th century. The United States of America must never forget that we are we're strongest working in concert with our friends, that our closest friends share our values and our commitments, that global leadership is neither some imperialistic ploy that America should abandon, nor a frivolous gift that America can afford. We cannot let either political side convince themselves that American leadership is either outdated or unnecessary. Free enterprise and open trade are in our interest. Maintaining a global presence is in our interest. Providing a security umbrella is in our interest. And you'd better believe working closely with our friends is in our interest. So for 70 years, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization has helped deter Soviet aggression, provide stability for post-Cold War transitions, and contribute to the fight against terrorism. So I recently suggested to Speaker Pelosi that we invite the Secretary General Stoltenberg to a joint session of Congress earlier this year. Hardly noticed in America, but a big deal in Europe because it underscored how important the Congress felt NATO was. So I'm glad NATO allies have stepped up their contributions and that they continue to stand with us around the world and in cyberspace. As Stoltenberg himself put it to the Congress, it's good to have friends. Good to have friends. And to not attack them. And I might add, the best way to have good friends is to be a reliable one yourself. John McCain knew that. He knew that American security is interwoven with America's influence, and that our influence depends on our willingness to step up and to lead, to stand with our friends and with the oppressed, to help keep hope alive around the world. That, my friends, is our mission. American leadership is what this organization, IRI, is all about, and I'm humbled to accept this honor named after my good friend. So thank you for the honor. Thank you for all your work. Good night, and God bless America.